She replaced her uncle as a delivery driver for one day, and accidentally delivered to a CEO who fell in love with her. Emma adjusted the delivery uniform over her oversized sweater, slipping her phone into the back pocket of her jeans. The cap was a little too big, and the van smelled faintly of old takeout and coffee, but she didn't mind. It was only for one day. Her Uncle Tom, a kind-hearted man in his 60s, had come down with a nasty flu the night before and begged her to help cover his route. "Just today, Em. It's a few stops around downtown, nothing complicated," he said between coughs. Emma, 25, a freelance artist with more time than income, had agreed. She figured a little detour from canvases and brushes might even be fun. Maybe she'd find inspiration in the city streets. By mid-morning, the deliveries were going smoothly. She followed the GPS instructions diligently, triple-checked the names on the packages, and even smiled through awkward elevator rides. Then, just as she was making her way to her final and most important stop, at a towering glass building in the heart of the financial district, she saw her. An elderly woman, small and hunched, was sprawled on the edge of the sidewalk. Her purse lay open beside her, apples rolling into the gutter. A couple of passers-by glanced her way but kept walking. Emma didn't think twice. She pulled the van over, rushed out, and crouched beside the woman. "Ma'am, are you okay?" she asked, gently taking the woman's hand. "I tripped. My ankle," the woman winced. Emma helped her sit up, gathered her groceries, and found a bench nearby shaded by a small tree. She used the first aid kit from the van to clean a scrape on the woman's palm and waited until she was sure the woman could contact someone to pick her up. "Thank you, dear," the woman whispered, her voice shaking. "Most people just walked right past." Emma smiled softly. "I couldn't do that." Only when she returned to the van and restarted the GPS did she notice the time. She was 22 minutes behind schedule. She raced to the final stop, Lancaster & Co., a sleek, mirrored skyscraper that seemed to tower above the clouds. She parked at the loading zone, grabbed the package, and jogged into the lobby, breath slightly short. At the front desk, she was directed to the executive floor. Upstairs, she stepped into a room so quiet and polished, it made her sneakers squeak on the marble floor. A tall man stood by the glass wall, his back turned to her, looking out at the skyline. "Delivery for Mr. Lancaster," Emma said, holding out the small but clearly expensive box. He turned. His expression was unreadable. Sharp jawline, expensive watch, suit tailored to perfection. His eyes flicked to the clock on the wall, then to the package, then to her. "You're 22 minutes late." Emma blinked, caught off guard by the tone. "I'm really sorry," she said, stepping forward. "I don't want excuses." His voice was cool, clipped. "I run a company, not a sidewalk hot dog stand. Time matters here." Emma froze. "I understand, but..." I stopped to help. "I don't care what your excuse is," he interrupted, taking the box from her hand with barely a glance. "If your company can't deliver on time, I'll find one that can." Her mouth opened slightly, but nothing came out. He had already turned away. Emma stood there for a moment, heart pounding, face burning. No one had ever spoken to her like that, not for being late, and certainly not when the reason was helping someone in need. Her fingers clenched into fists at her sides, but she bit her tongue. Fighting back tears, she turned and walked out of the office, past the gleaming floors and cold stairs, back into the elevator and down into the street. She sat in the van for a full minute before starting the engine. The city buzzed around her, oblivious. But inside, something in Emma's chest had shifted, not just from embarrassment, but from the weight of being misunderstood, when all she had done was try to do something right. As she drove away, she whispered, barely audible, "I'd still do it again." Emma didn't cry that night, not really. She stood in the tiny kitchen of her apartment, stirring a mug of peppermint tea, trying to shake off the words that had cut sharper than she'd expected. "I run a company, not a sidewalk hot dog stand." They echoed louder than they should have. Maybe it wasn't just the words, but the tone, the complete dismissal, like she hadn't mattered at all. But she told herself it was fine. She'd help someone who needed her. That was what mattered. She didn't tell her Uncle Tom about the incident. When he called to thank her for helping with the route, Sounding groggy and grateful, she simply said, "It was all good, you rest." She didn't want him to feel guilty. He would have apologized 1,000 times, blamed himself, maybe even tried to confront the company, and Emma had had enough confrontation for one day. Instead, she opened her sketchbook. The worn, leather-bound pad had been her quietest companion since she was 13. She flipped to a blank page and let her pencil find the shape of the elderly woman's face. Kind, weathered, strong despite the fall. Then she drew the park bench, the scattered apples, the slightly crooked walking stick. It calmed her, as it always did. Art was her safe place, the one place no one judged her for being too slow, too soft, too quiet. Her apartment was modest, cozy with second-hand furniture and mismatched curtains. Plants thrived on the windowsill. Small pots of basil and mint, a struggling tomato vine, and a stubborn cactus she called Theo. Bookshelves lined the living room, filled with old art books, poetry collections, and journals she'd filled over the years. She lived alone, but never felt lonely. Not really. Still, every now and then, the words of her ex-boyfriend crept back into her thoughts like shadows. "You're too nice, Em. This world doesn't reward people like you." He'd said it during a fight. Or maybe it was their last conversation. She couldn't remember anymore. What she did remember was the sting, the implication that her kindness was a flaw, a liability, that being soft meant being weak. She'd loved him once, or thought she had, but love that makes you doubt yourself isn't love. It's a mirror that only shows you the cracks. Since then, Emma had stopped sharing her art publicly. She'd never shown anyone her full portfolio, not her friends, not even her family. When people asked what she did, she simply said, "I do freelance work, odd jobs, some design stuff. Safer that way, less explaining, less risk." But it didn't mean she didn't dream. Sometimes late at night she imagined owning a little gallery cafe, a place where people could sip tea surrounded by paintings and music, where no one was in a hurry, and no one needed to be anyone other than who they already were, a soft world for soft people. She knew it was silly, but it was hers. The next morning, Emma put the incident behind her. She texted her uncle to check on his fever, then sat down to answer a few emails from clients who needed digital illustrations. She made a mental note to grocery shop, finish a sketch for a children's book project, and maybe repaint her living room wall. She'd been meaning to do it for months. She didn't expect to see Liam Lancaster again, and honestly, she didn't want to. Some people, she told herself, were just built different, harder, faster, sharper around the edges. She wasn't angry, just tired of pretending that being good wasn't good enough. Later that week, she passed by the same park where she'd helped the old woman. The bench was empty now, but a single red apple sat on the seat. Emma smiled softly. Maybe, just maybe, doing the right thing didn't always need applause. Maybe it was enough to know you'd done it at all. Liam Lancaster didn't believe in grace. He believed in structure, schedules, control. Everything in his world was calculated, timed to the minute, and expected to run like clockwork, because the one time it hadn't, his world had crumbled. He was 10 when his mother left. No warnings, no explanations, just a letter on the kitchen counter and a cab pulling away from the curb. She said she couldn't breathe in this life anymore, that she needed to find herself. Liam had waited for her to come back. She never did. After that, his father, once mild and poetic, turned into a man of order. Emotions were replaced with performance metrics. Meals became timed routines. Late was unacceptable. Mistakes were punished. By the time Liam turned 15, he had learned to stop asking why. By 20, he had his MBA. At 28, he became the youngest CEO in his firm's history, and by 32, he had built an empire of efficiency. Everyone knew his rules: 5-minute grace period, 0 tolerance for excuses, and if you couldn't keep up, you were out. He didn't do personal, he didn't do messy, which is why, days after the incident with the delivery girl, he was still thinking about her. And it annoyed him. He didn't even know her name, just the look in her eyes when he dismissed her. Surprise, shame, and something else. Something that hadn't left his mind since. He'd asked his assistant on a whim to pull footage from the lobby cameras that day. He told himself it was to verify the delay, standard protocol. But when the video played, something in him cracked. There she was, stepping out of the elevator, clutching the package, breathless. And then the security footage from outside, synced by timestamp. Liam watched as the young woman kneeled beside an elderly woman collapsed on the sidewalk, helping her sit up, retrieving her groceries, gently wiping her hand with something. Was that a tissue? A handkerchief? The whole sequence lasted maybe 7 minutes. Then she sprinted back to the van, eyes wide with worry. She had stopped to help someone. That's why she was late. Liam leaned back in his chair, stunned by the weight of what he saw and what he'd said to her. "I don't pay for excuses." The words echoed bitterly now. She hadn't defended herself, not once. She'd tried to speak, he remembered that now, but he hadn't let her. He had written her off the second she'd been late, and she had walked away. No anger, no demands, just walked away. He watched the footage again and again. There was something about the way she helped that woman, no hesitation, no performance, just quiet urgency, a gentleness that didn't need an audience. It reminded him of someone he used to know, before life became about margins and meetings, before he learned to put walls around everything that could hurt him. His father would have scoffed. Kindness is a luxury, he used to say. Liam used to believe that too, but now he wasn't so sure. For the first time in years, he felt wrong. Not just about a business transaction, but as a man. He stared at the paused image on the screen. Emma crouched beside the elderly woman, hand outstretched, sunlight catching in her hair. He whispered to no one. She didn't explain, but she deserved to be heard. He closed his laptop, and for the first time in a long time, he wondered what it might feel like to listen. The call came just after dawn. Emma's phone buzzed with a number she didn't recognize, and her heart sank when she heard the nurse's voice on the other end. "Your uncle's fever has spiked. He's being admitted for observation. Nothing too alarming yet, but he'll need to stay for a few days." By mid-morning, Emma was in her uncle's apartment, slipping back into the too big uniform and scanning the updated delivery log. She'd only planned to help once, but now, well, she couldn't just leave him short-handed. "You sure you can handle it?" Tom asked hoarsely over the phone from his hospital bed. Emma smiled through the worry tightening her chest. "Don't worry, I've got it covered." The route was familiar now. She zipped through the first few deliveries with ease, even found herself humming softly behind the wheel. But when she saw the next stop, a boutique cafe tucked beside a high-rise office tower, her chest tightened. It was near Lancaster & Co., not his building, not his order. Still, she braced herself. Emma stepped into the cafe just before noon, carrying a small insulated bag for a regular customer. The place buzzed with business chatter and the hiss of espresso machines. She was scanning the crowd for her contact when a familiar voice caught her off guard. "Excuse me." She turned, and there he was, Liam Lancaster. Out of his suit jacket, sleeves rolled up, eyes not sharp or annoyed, but hesitant. "Hi," he said. Emma blinked. "Hi." "I didn't expect to see you again," he said, "but I'm glad I did." She tilted her head slightly, unsure what to say. Liam cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. "I wanted to say something, about the other day." Emma waited. "I was wrong," he said simply. "About you, about the situation. I saw the footage, I know why you were late." Her breath caught. "He knew? I should have let you explain," he continued. "Instead, I acted like well, you know what I acted like." She couldn't help it. Her lips curved into a soft smile. "I appreciate you saying that," she said. "Really." Liam looked almost relieved. I wanted you to know. I'm sorry for how I spoke to you." Emma nodded gently. "It's okay. I understand. You were under pressure." He blinked. "Still, that's no excuse." There was a beat of silence. Not awkward, just unfamiliar. Liam glanced at the bag in her hand. "Delivering again?" She gave a small shrug. "My uncle's in the hospital. I'm filling in until he gets better." He nodded, something flickering in his eyes. "Well, they're lucky to have you. Thanks," she said quietly. Their eyes held for a moment longer than expected. Then her phone buzzed with the next stop, and the spell broke. "Well," she said, adjusting the strap on her shoulder. "I should—" "Right, of course." He stepped back. She offered a parting smile. "Take care, Mr. Lancaster." "Liam," he corrected gently. "Liam," she repeated, then disappeared into the crowd. That night, Liam sat in his office staring at the delivery schedule he normally ignored. It was silly, ridiculous even, but he found himself scanning for the same delivery service, wondering if she'd be assigned to another stop in the area, wondering if he'd see her again, and for the first time in years, he hoped for a delay, just long enough to say hello. The next few weeks passed in quiet, unexpected rhythms. Emma continued her temporary delivery route while her uncle recovered, and somehow, fate, or something gentler, seemed determined to keep placing her within Liam's orbit. The encounters were brief: a delivery to the office next door, a forgotten lunch order someone else at Lancaster & Co. had placed, a package handed off in the lobby while Liam just happened to be coming in or out. But each time, he stopped, sometimes just to say hello, sometimes to offer a comment about the weather or ask how her uncle was doing. Once, he held the door for her even though she was a full 10 steps away. It wasn't grand, it wasn't dramatic. It was human. And Emma never pressed. She never asked about his company, his suits, his money. She didn't seem impressed by his status or intimidated. She smiled, nodded, offered him a warm "take care" or "have a nice day," like she would anyone else. It was disarming, and Liam didn't know what to do with that. He began to notice things: how her eyes lit up when she talked about a book she'd just finished, how she always paused for a moment when stepping out into the evening light, as if collecting something sacred from the sky, how she carried a thermos in her bag and once, when he looked a little too cold standing outside, offered him a small cup of homemade ginger tea without saying a word. "You always carry tea around?" he asked that day, amused and touched. Emma shrugged. "Helps with the cold, and some days just need something warm." She had a way of saying simple things that stayed with him far longer than they should. One afternoon she arrived at the building with a familiar brown parcel. She looked hesitant. "This isn't a delivery," she said, "just something small." She reached into her bag and pulled out a tiny handmade keychain, braided leather, a simple charm in the shape of a crescent moon. "I make these when I can't sleep," she said, offering it in her open palm. "I have too many at home. This one felt like yours." Liam blinked, caught off guard. "You made this?" She nodded. "It's not much, just a thank you for that day at the cafe when you apologized." He took it slowly, as if afraid to break it. "Thank you," he said, voice low. "No one's ever given me something like this. It's just a keychain." "It's not just anything." She blushed, then laughed softly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. He didn't know what to say next, and she didn't wait for him to find the words. "Have a good day, Liam." And just like that, she was gone again. That night, he placed the keychain on his desk. He stared at it longer than he meant to. It wasn't expensive. It wasn't sleek or polished. But it was made with care, and something about that, the time, the thought, the quiet kindness, it undid something in him. For so long, Liam had believed he had to be perfect to be respected, polished to be valued, impeccable to be worthy. But with Emma, none of that seemed to matter. He didn't feel the pressure to impress. He didn't need to perform. With her, he didn't have to be Liam Lancaster, CEO. He could just be Liam, and for the first time in his adult life, that felt like enough. The absence was small at first, barely noticeable in the whirl of meetings and reports. Then came the second day, the third. By the end of the week, Liam found himself watching the clock near the lobby window around noon, wondering if he'd see that familiar delivery van pull up. It never did. He called down to reception. "Has the delivery service changed?" "No, sir," the receptionist replied. "Same company, but the girl, Emma, I think, hasn't been in. We heard she was in an accident." Liam's chest tightened. "What kind of accident?" Not serious, just a minor car crash, but she's taking a few weeks off to recover." He hung up without responding. That night, he couldn't focus. He skimmed emails without absorbing them, left his dinner half-touched, and found himself pulling up the delivery company's main line on his phone. He didn't know what he planned to say, only that he had to know if she was okay. When he finally called, a tired but friendly voice picked up. "Emma? Oh, she's all right," said the woman. "Just a sprained wrist and some bruises. Poor thing got hit by someone running a red light. She's resting. Drawing again, thank goodness. Drawing, of course." Liam thanked the woman and asked, somewhat sheepishly, if he might have the company's official return address. "To send a get-well package," he added, though he wasn't sure he would. The next afternoon he drove there himself. The building was older, tucked between a bookstore and a laundromat. A soft gold bell jingled above the door as he stepped inside. Boxes lined the front counter. A bulletin board displayed hand-drawn notes and community flyers, and there she was, behind the desk, her right arm in a cast, a pencil loosely held in her left hand. She didn't see him at first. He froze. Her sketch pad was open on the counter, a soft sketch blooming across the page, half-finished but unmistakably hers. Loose lines, light shading. It was a rooftop. A figure leaning against a railing, the outline of the city behind. It was him. Liam cleared his throat gently. Emma looked up. For a heartbeat, surprise flickered in her eyes. Then she smiled, softly, shyly. "Hi." "You're drawing left hand," he said. "I'm learning," she replied, holding up her cast. "My right arm's on strike." "I heard about the accident. I wanted to check on you." She nodded. "I'm okay, just sore. And slower than usual." "You scared me," he said before he could stop himself. She blinked. "I did? I kept waiting for you to show up." He paused. "I think I forgot what it felt like to miss someone." Emma didn't speak for a moment. Then she gently closed her sketchbook. "I won't be delivering anymore," she said. "Uncle Tom's almost back on his feet, and I think I need to focus on other things." He nodded slowly, trying not to let the words settle too deeply. "That makes sense," he said. She tilted her head. "I don't know how to say this right," he admitted, "but the days felt different when you were around. Better." Her smile was sad but warm. "That's kind of you. It's true." There was a long silence, filled with everything neither of them could quite say. Emma finally spoke. "You know, I used to think being kind made me easy to forget, but lately I've been thinking, maybe it just makes you easier to remember, too." Liam looked at her, this girl with a broken wrist, a quiet smile, and a heart that still radiated warmth even after being bruised. And something in him cracked. He didn't want her to become another almost, in a life full of strict timelines and controlled goodbyes. He wanted more time, more chances. But for now, all he could do was nod. "Take care of yourself," he said. "You too," she replied. He stepped outside, the bell jingling softly behind him. That night, Liam lay awake long after midnight, the moonlight casting faint lines across his bedroom ceiling. He turned the small leather keychain over in his hand, tracing the braid with his thumb. For the first time, he realized he wasn't afraid of being alone. He was afraid of losing the one person who'd never once asked him to be anything but himself. A week after their last conversation, Emma received a small white envelope in her mailbox. No logo, no bold letters, just her name written in clean, careful handwriting. Inside was a formal invitation to an upcoming charity art exhibition hosted by Lancaster & Co. The venue was a repurposed warehouse turned gallery space. The theme centered around art as healing, and on the back of the invitation, a short handwritten note. "If you're free that night, I'd be honored if you'd come. Liam." Emma stared at the paper for a long time. It had been a quiet week. She was still adjusting to life off the road, spending more time with her sketchbooks, more time with herself. She hadn't expected to hear from him again, at least not like this. Still, curiosity, and something warmer, led her there. The gallery buzzed with soft music and gentle conversation. Canvases lined the walls, works from local artists, hobbyists, and even anonymous submissions from children's hospitals and therapy centers. The air smelled faintly of lavender and paint. Emma wandered slowly, hands folded in front of her. And then she saw it. A small painting in a muted wooden frame. Her own. One she had nearly thrown away months ago. A blend of sunrise colors, the silhouette of a figure sitting on a rooftop, watching the world quietly unfold. There was no name beneath it, just a simple white card with the words, "Donated by an artist who thought it wasn't good enough." She was wrong. Her throat tightened. She turned, and there he was. Liam stood a few steps behind her, dressed in a charcoal suit, not overly formal, but still effortlessly put together. His expression was soft, open. "You put that up?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I asked your uncle for a piece," he admitted. Hems sent a few. That one, I couldn't stop looking at it. Emma blinked back, the sting in her eyes. "I didn't even sign it." "You didn't have to," he said. "You just had to believe it was worthy of being seen." She looked at the painting again, then at him. "Why?" she asked. "Why go through all this?" He exhaled slowly. "Because you reminded me that the world doesn't need more perfection. It needs more people who care, who pause, who choose kindness even when no one's watching." He stepped closer. "And because," he added, "I wanted to give you something that wasn't about fixing, but about being with." Emma felt her heart thud. "If you'll let me," Liam said gently, extending his hand, "I'd like to take you out. No rules, no deadlines, no performance metrics." His smile curved slightly. "Just a date. No time limit." She stared at his hand, then back at his eyes, and for once, she didn't feel the need to overthink. She reached forward, placing her hand in his. "I think I'd like that," she said. 1 year later, the little corner studio on Maple Street was filled with light. Sunlight streamed in through wide windows, casting warm patterns across easels and canvas, worn wooden floors and jars of paint-stained brushes. Laughter echoed gently from the back room, where a group of teenagers were setting up for that day's workshop. Emma moved through the space with the quiet authority of someone who had finally stepped into her own skin. She wore an apron splattered with color, her hair tied up loosely, a smear of blue on her cheek she hadn't yet noticed. The studio, Lighthouse Arts, had opened its doors that spring as a place for community, creativity, and healing. It was part gallery, part classroom, part sanctuary, and at the heart of it all, Emma. It hadn't been easy. She had doubted herself 100 times, worried she wasn't qualified, wasn't brave enough. But every time she faltered, she remembered that gallery night. The way Liam had looked at her painting, the way he had looked at her, and he hadn't stopped looking. In quiet ways, he'd stayed. He didn't try to run the show. He didn't write big checks or try to put his name on anything. Instead, he showed up early some Saturdays to set up chairs, brought her coffee when her hands were full, and stood at the back of the room during every workshop, just to be near. Sometimes, he'd sit beside the kids and doodle stick figures with them. Sometimes, he'd just watch her, like she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. He still ran a company, still wore suits, and carried a calendar that ticked down to the minute. But around her, he moved slower, softer. Today was the official grand opening of the studio's community program. The place was packed with local artists, families, donors, and friends. Fairy lights lined the walls. Easels displayed student work. There was lemonade and cookies in the back. Emma stood at the front of the room, heart fluttering with nerves, as she prepared to say a few words. Liam caught her eye from the front row, where he sat beside her Uncle Tom, healthy, beaming, proudly wearing a studio volunteer button. Emma took a breath. "Hi, everyone," she began, her voice steady but warm. "Thank you so much for being here." She paused, glancing around at the faces in the room. "This studio wasn't born out of confidence," she continued. "It was born out of fear. Fear that I wasn't good enough, that I'd always be behind, always be too soft for a world that moves too fast." There were a few murmurs of quiet agreement. She smiled gently. Some of you know this, but a year ago, I was helping my uncle deliver packages, and one day I was late, 22 minutes to be exact, because I stopped to help an elderly woman who had fallen. She glanced at Liam, who sat still, listening. I got yelled at for it, pretty harshly. Laughter rippled softly through the crowd. But that same person, she said, eyes resting on him now, was also the first person to look at one of my paintings and say the words I didn't even know I needed. You're good enough. Her voice wavered slightly, but she held steady. And now here we are. She spread her hands toward the space around her. The art, the people, the light. This place is proof that kindness makes ripples, that pausing to care, even when it's inconvenient, can change someone's whole story. The applause that followed was warm and thunderous. Emma stepped down from the makeshift stage, cheeks flushed. Liam met her near the edge, eyes full of emotion. He took her hand in his without a word, and then with a smile only she would understand, he said, You once brought light to a stranger on the street. Now you bring it to me, every day. Emma squeezed his hand, her voice barely more than a whisper. I'm not afraid of being seen anymore. He kissed her forehead softly. Good, he said, because I don't think I'll ever stop looking. And in the middle of the crowded studio, surrounded by paint and light and laughter, they stood together, not perfect, but complete. Sometimes, love doesn't arrive with grand gestures or perfect timing. Sometimes it shows up 22 minutes late, but it stays. In a world that moves too fast, kindness is still the bravest choice, and seeing someone not just for who they are on paper, but for who they are in their quietest moments, can change everything. Emma didn't need to be perfect. She just needed someone who chose to stay, and Liam didn't need to be saved. He just needed someone who reminded him how to feel. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories, where we tell emotional, real, and unforgettable tales that remind you, sometimes being soft is the strongest thing you can be. Hit the bell icon so you never miss a story that stirs your soul. Thank you for watching, and always remember, you are enough, even if no one has said it yet.